Joining me now, Nikole HannahJones. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist at the New York Times Magazine, the author of the 1619 Project, the co-founder of the Ida B. Wells Society, and a contributor to the new book, 400 Souls. Nikole, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm sorry about my internet today.
That's okay. It is good to have you any way we can get you. Nikole, let's talk about this book and this project. The idea that you have put forward starting in 2019, and I have to tell you, when I first met you and we first talked about this, I learned a lot about American history that I didn't know, was simply to tell people things they don't know, to allow Black Americans inclusion in the foundational stories of this country. Are you shocked and surprised by the pushback you got to this project?
You know, I am and I'm not. So obviously, the reason that I even felt I needed to create the 1619 Project was because we have not been taught this history and we have not grappled truthfully with the legacy of slavery, and that slavery predates the founding of our country by 150 years, and that slavery is as foundational to the American story as anything is. So I knew that there was going to be some pushback to that because we have, engaged in a centuries-long endeavor not to deal with that fact and that truth. I am, however, surprised by the extent of the pushback, by the duration of the pushback. Ali, that project, the 1619 Project, published a year and a half ago, and I certainly didn't expect a presidential commission, an executive order against the project, and now this effort by states to really censor and prohibit a work of American journalism from being taught in American public schools simply because they don't like what it says. So that part does surprise me.
You make an interesting point. We met more than a year and a half ago when this was first published, a lot earlier than George Floyd and the protests that sort of gripped American consciousness in the last year. What's the overlap between the two? The work you had been doing in setting the tone for a different telling of American history then jumped onto the stage with a whole lot of Americans who were understanding that some of the things that we have complained about in American history, the injustices, the lynchings and things like that, are very current in 2020 and 2021.
Absolutely. I think what the 1619 Project helped to do was to give context to what we were seeing last summer when all across the globe we watched a white police officer lynch a Black man nonchalantly with his hands in his pocket. And he did that because he believed that he could do that and not face a consequence. Well, there's a reason for that. And so many, I think, white Americans have tended to view these incidents, racial injustice in general, as, about individual actors, as not connected to any larger history or larger pattern. And what the 1619 Project helped to do was to understand that the country we live in today, when that officer decides he can do that, and then the reaction that we see, that this all stems from the legacy of slavery and our inability to deal with that history and to work to make it right. So it provided really that connection between the past and the present. And it allows us, I think so much of the division that we see, so much of the inability to have empathy is because we don't even have a shared understanding of the truth of our history, of the facts of our history. And if you don't have that shared understanding of what actually happened, then you're unable to grapple with what is occurring right now. Like I do, we saw all across these protests after George Floyd's killing, the invoking of that 400 years, the invoking of the year 1619. And you saw Americans really making that connection back to the past. And I think that that's really important.
One of the points that you make, though, is that these histories are in parallel. So to some degree, I don't want to do a disservice to it by saying it's Black history, because the point you're making is it's American history. American history can't just be the white history of America.
Exactly. So this is Black History Month, and I do think it's important to set aside time to really study specifically the role that Black Americans have played in Black contributions. But to be clear, that these are the roles that Black people have played in the larger tapestry of American history. And what I really argue in the essay of 400 Souls, the opening essay, is that we've tended to treat these histories as if they are running in parallel, when in fact they are intertwined, right? We cannot imagine a country we look around America where Black people did not exist. The Black experience, white reaction to Black people has shaped so much about this country. We need to stop acting as if there's American history, which of course largely means white American history, and then there's Black history separately, indigenous history separately. This is all part of the intertwined history of America. And as I say in the essay, the America that comes into being in 1619 is the multiracial country that we are, right? There are indigenous people, there are African people, there are white people. And I wish if we could understand the beauty of that multiracial vision, we would be a different country than we are today.
Nicolle, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your writing. Thank you for the 1619 Project. Nikole HannahJones is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist with the New York Times Magazine. If you haven't read the book, get the book, download it, because we're going to be talking about it every single week.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.